Hello, I'm Graham Fitch, coming to you from Steinway Hall in London. Thank you very much for joining me. This is for Pianist magazine, and in this episode I'm going to be talking about contrapuntal playing, and not only how to learn contrapuntal pieces, but the importance of contrapuntal music for pianists in the development of controlling sounds, independent fingers, independent listening of lines, and so on. So let's first of all define what counterpoint is. It's two or more horizontal lines or tunes, if you will, that sound together and that kind of interact with each other. So this is an example of counterpoint. That's two lines sounding together. So you've got your first violin, if you will. And you've got your cello, which is doing something a little bit more athletic. And that's the first Goldberg variation. Now, if I skip along a little bit to the 21st Goldberg variation, this is in three lines. So let me play you the thing together, just a little snippet. So the bass line is very different from the upper two lines. Long quarters, crotchet notes, chromatic with a little flower at the end. And here's your middle voice, divided between the two hands. And the upper voice. And so on. Now that would be easy to play, or easier to play, if I had three hands. I don't, obviously. So I've got to be able to divide that middle line up between the two hands. And we'll be looking at the value of that in a little bit. But let's, first of all, having looked at what counterpoint is, let's look at some other textures. Well, a kind of obvious texture is melody and accompaniment. So something like this. So my ear is on that beautiful tune in the right hand. That's Chopin's Berceuse, lullaby. And you'll notice that the left hand is just playing harmony, in fact, tonic and dominant. And then we get this tune on the top, a lovely tune on the top. Now, if we look at what happens in bar 7, interestingly, we get two tunes in the right hand. We get a soprano, which is the main line. And I have to play that really beautifully with inflection, with character, obviously with good sound, with a sense of how you would sing it. I'm playing it as I would sing it. Now, what about the second line that comes in at bar 7? Even though I'm playing that softer, I've still got to give it shape. I've still got to give it profile. So if I would then put those two lines together, you'll notice that my underneath line is a little softer than the top line, but I'm aiming for independence of shaping within those two, well, between those two lines. And of course, the left hand will take care of itself because I've been practicing that for the last few bars. So my ear has to divide into two. My right hand has to divide into two. And that would really only be possible to do if we've done a lot of pure counterpoint as we develop as pianists. I've got an example of something else which moves in lines or is conceived of, in lines, a string quartet. This is the Pathetique Sonata of Beethoven, second movement. We all know this. We've got this lovely tune on the top. This is the second violin. First violin hasn't come in yet. The viola doing the sort of scratchy stuff that violists are called upon to do. Now I have to be able to play that rather softly because it's in itself not so interesting. But I've also got a bass line. I'm imagining how a cellist would phrase that. Bowing it, shaping it. Now when I put that all together, I'm really controlling my sound for each line. A little bit of support from the bass. You can hear that there's a bass line there, you can hear that there's a top there. So when we practice separately, I often don't mean, when I say separate practice, I don't mean necessarily separate hand practice, but separate strand practice. So we can play. And you see that the study of counterpoint, the study of pure counterpoint, is going to set me up to be able to do that beautifully. So where does this journey begin? Usually with the two-part inventions of Bach. So the C major invention, everybody knows, this lovely little theme. That's the first section that takes us from C major to the dominant key of G major. Now let's look at that. Both hands are equal in their importance, and this is what's important. The left hand isn't an accompaniment, it's not something in the background. I have to be able to play this just as easily and just as beautifully as that. Now, not only is this invention amazing, or the invention's amazing for equality between the hands, but also musical structure, which is why it's so great to be involved in this music. If you take the theme, the motif, the subject, you'll notice that later on we get an inversion of that subject. Did you notice that before? And in the third bar, and again, and again, and again, in a descending sequence. What the left hand is doing at that point comes from the very first four notes of. Yeah, so every little snippet of material is meaningful and essential. And you'll find that in this particular piece, we've got a cadence into the dominant, and then another cadence into the relative minor, and a reference to the subdominant as we get to the end of the invention. So Bach is teaching us not only keyboard skills, but musicianly skills as well, teaching us about music. Let's look at another one, the Number 14, the B flat major. Such a lovely theme to play. And you're probably thinking, well, the left hand looks easy. All that is just a kind of a slow broken chord, right? Wait a little bit. If you get to bar 4, you'll notice that that's all flipped upside down. Now my right hand has this broken chord and the left hand has the motif. So the left hand has to again be just as good as the right hand, and actually is the soloist at that particular point on the last page, anyway, on the second page, we get an ascending sequence. We get this pattern. Did you notice how Bach winds the music up in the ascending sequence? And then when we got to the top of the mountain, we kind of paraglide down, and the music gradually deflates or comes back to earth. So sometimes people look at Bach and say, well, I don't know what to do with it. There's no markings of crescendos or anything. What am I supposed to do? Well, the structure itself tells us what to do. So we've got, well, I imagine something here. I imagine a throw, let's say a ball, or if you really want to be ambitious, some sort of javelin maybe. So you've got the pre-throw here. That's the projection, and that's the fall. So as this falls, the next answer, the answer to that is rising. So what I have to listen to there is the falling and the rising. One voice falls, the other voice rises. And I've got to be able to control that by my ear. So it's demanding, making demands of me here. Strict counterpoint in two voices. I'm going to just move to the F sharp minor fugue from Book 2 of the Well-Tempered Clavier, which is a triple fugue. That means three subjects, three different subjects, treated differently than in combinations. Let's look at the first subject. Here's the answer in the dominant key. A little episode, commercial break. Now my bass voice comes in. That's known as the fugal exposition. Each voice has its say. The second theme, it's contrasting. This is now, let me play. So you can hear each voice is now bouncing that idea back and forth. The third subject is contrasting again. It features a flowing 16th note semiquaver line. There's the answer, and then the bass voice gets it. And in a miracle of engineering, all these three subjects can be put together like a kind of majestic jigsaw puzzle. And Bach does that in the last section. He combines the subjects together, and it's wonderful to behold. And again, as I say, if we had three hands, it would be easy to play, or easier to play. I've got to somehow make both hands work for the middle voice. So if I go to the very last few bars here, last 4 bars, let me play you slow motion so you can identify the themes. First subject in the soprano, third subject in the middle, second, could you hear those three voices all working together? So what I would do for practice, and this is where I'm going to use my separate practice tool, but I'm not thinking of hands separately at all. I'm thinking voices separately. So what I would do first of all, is to take each voice out by itself. Now let me just show you that top voice, but I have to use the fingering that I'm going to end up needing to use. So we often get bonkers fingering. I'll show you what that's like in the middle voice, but here's the soprano. Here's my first subject. And my second theme, actually it's the third theme, isn't it? In the middle. Now here's where it goes bonkers. Can you see how I'm passing the music backwards and forwards? And I've got to be able to shape the line beautifully as well, and make it sound like I'm playing it in one hand. And then the bass voice comes in. And I'm singing. I like to sing these lines. Let me put together, this is how I would next advise you practice anything contrapuntal, in combinations of two. So if I've got soprano, alto, and let's call it soprano, alto, bass, you could say soprano, tenor, bass if you want, but top, middle, bottom. So I've got soprano and alto together, I've got alto and bass together, and I've got soprano and bass together. Three different combinations. So let me do soprano and alto, nice and slowly. This note comes just after. Okay, now what about soprano and bass? And bass and the middle voice. Let me play from here. Finish. Now, when I'm ready to put the three voices together, what I'm going to do is to slow the tempo right down, and I'm talking about super slow. All three voices together. I'm going to put the other little bits of counterpoint that I omitted because they weren't the subject material. Release my thumb. I can really focus on every little attack and release here. Now my bass has got to come up here. Can you feel how slow this is? I won't torture you by playing all the way to the end. That is seriously slow. The next thing I would do would be to add voicing to that, meaning exaggerated voicing. So I'd like you to imagine forte, pianissimo, pianissimo. Let me first of all do the top voice forte, and the underneath two voices really soft. Now, the middle voice. All my attention is going onto that tenor voice. Now let me put my attention onto the bass voice. if I can do that, if I develop the skills to do that, it means that in a performance of this fugue, I can imagine I'm some sort of a sound engineer and I've got 3 volume control buttons in front of me, and I can bring up the soprano a little bit, turn that alto down, bring the bass up, and then a couple of bars later maybe a little bit more here, less there. Do you see? So this is the skill that we can develop. These are the skills that we develop in strictly contrapuntal pieces that we then use in all music. As I showed you the Pathétique example. What about this example from Rachmaninoff's Prelude in D, Opus 23, number 4, starting at bar 19. We've got 3 elements. Let me play you the bottom 2. But it's not just a question of right hand singing, left hand accompanying or playing softer. I've got a clarinet, desk hand on the top. Now I bet you if you were to give that line to a clarinetist in a top orchestra, they would invest their soul into that line. They wouldn't just say, oh, somebody else has got the tune, I can just busk there for a moment. They would be giving that their all. So what we do then is we play this line softer on the top. But you can hear I'm giving the upper line also profile. That means shaping, color, meaning. And this is the payoff from studying purely contrapuntal music. Not only do you get the great repertoire of Bach and Mendelssohn, Shostakovich, you get the skills that you can pass over to all music, because so much music is built up in lines. So I hope that gave you some ideas. I really hope it gave you some ideas. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.